Okay. And good morning. I did it again. All right. Well, if it happens again, I'll just roll with it, I suppose. But I think we're ready to get started. So if Patty O'Mahony's able to start the recording, let me know and I'll get us gaveled to order.
We're recording.
We're recording, okay. Get my gavel out, make it official. And good morning. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Oak Harbor Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is August 29th, 2023 at 10 a.m. We have one item on the agenda for 10 a.m. This is number 23030014, and it involves a request for approval to subdivide an approximately 4.8 acre property into 28 lots for single-family residential development with associated improvements and appurtenances on property that is approximately at 1300 Southwest 24th Avenue. And that's the existing intersection of Southwest 24th and Ridgeway Drive. I know we do have a second matter that is set to begin at 11 o'clock, and that is the Angel of Creativity, or Angel de la Creatividad. My Spanish is terrible. That will be at 11. So if you were interested in that second matter, we will be back at 11 for that. But just wanted to let folks know. So with that, my name is Andrew Reeves. I serve as the city's hearing examiner, and today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and then the specific criteria for approval of a preliminary plat under the municipal code. And because this does involve the subdivision of land, ensure that it complies with the requirements of our state's Subdivision Act, which are in Chapter 5817 of the Revised Code of Washington. To that end, I received several exhibits in advance of today's hearing that I had an opportunity to review. These include a staff report prepared by city staff, maps that kind of show the vicinity and the zoning for the property, the application materials themselves, and there are sub exhibits, as it were, but these include the application, the project plans, information on how stormwater would be addressed or treated on site, geotechnical analysis of the property, several reports or information provided about critical areas on site, cultural resources survey, and then information on traffic and how it would be addressed with the project. So those were the application materials. In addition, information on the environmental review that occurred under our state's Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, including the determination ultimately that was made in relation to SEPA, and then information on noticing that occurred in relation to the application as well as today's hearing. And then finally, I think there was one public comment that was received in relation to this proposal. So those were provided for me and identified as exhibits 1 through 6, and I'm going to go ahead and admit those exhibits into the record. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, and let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I will address admitting additional exhibits at that time. All testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because we're my decision to be appealed under our state's Land Use Petition Act, or LUPA. The recording of today's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits and my decision, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. Finally, the order that we typically follow, and I believe we're going to follow today, is first we'll hear from city staff, who will sort of give an overview of the review process that led us to today's hearing, and any sort of unique aspects or information they wanted to share about the proposal. After that, we'll hear from the applicant team or an applicant representative, as it were, and that will be their opportunity to provide any additional information they feel that myself or members of the public should be made aware of in advance of my making a decision on the proposal. Then we'll see if there are members of the public interested in testifying, and if so, they will have that opportunity. And then, if necessary, at the end, we'll come back to the applicant and city staff to respond to any such testimony. I sometimes ask questions of those that are testifying. It's not uncommon. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal so that within a couple weeks of the record closing, I'm able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. So finally, with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. And I believe Ray Lindenberg will be presenting this matter on behalf of staff.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, then I will go ahead and get you sworn in. And is your camera working, or is this my problem on my end, Ray?
I'm not sure. I think my camera's working, but
Council, can you see Ray's camera? I'm just wondering if I'm having issues with Ring this morning.
Yeah, Ray's camera's working fine.
I have no idea what's going on then. Okay. Well, I'm confident I don't actually need to see you, so I'll swear you in, but do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Okay, thank you. And can you state and spell your name for the recording?
Yes. First name Ray, R-A-Y, last name Lindenberg, L-I-N-D-E-N-B-U-R-G. I'm the senior planner for the city of Elk Harbor and the project manager for this particular project.
Great. Thank you for being here. And did my sort of rundown of the exhibits track with what you were hoping I would look at in advance of the hearing?
Yes, it absolutely did. I wanted to also let you know that there's been a little bit of conversation back and forth with the applicant and myself and the city engineering staff regarding a couple of, or I guess one of the conditions of approval. So I'm sure that we will have that discussion later on after I go through this. I just want to let you know that if you have specific questions regarding the technical aspects of that discussion, John Pollock is available to answer those questions here today. So,
okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay. So, as you mentioned, we're looking at an approximately 4.8 acre site that's going to be divided into 28 lots. I'm going to throw up on my screen. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but hopefully you will. The site location, just for informational purposes, if I can get this to work. Okay. So what we have is SR 20, Southwest 24th Avenue, and then the site is these two lots right here at the terminus of Ridgeway Drive, which is in the county. You can see the boundary lines there in pink. City limits are in this area here. We have a county enclave on Ridgeway Drive right there. So essentially what the concept is here is the road is going to align with the north-south intersection with Ridgeway Drive there and continue through the parcel. They will have a temporary turnaround cul-de-sac at the south end of the parcel to eventually connect to future development to the south. That is the Gary Oaks subdivision that is on the south and east sides of their parcel. The hope there is that eventually those will connect, hopefully very near future, but it's hard to say at this point, you know, with development when things happen. The other connection between this subdivision and future subdivisions is through a pedestrian walkway that goes east-west, approximately 2/3 of the way down to the south of the parcel there. The pedestrian connection is aligned with a proposed pedestrian connection in the Gary Oaks subdivision. And then we asked the applicant to continue it through to the west side to connect to potential future development on the west, which is still in the county, not annexed into the city, and is just forest property right now. The zoning of the property is R2, which is limited multifamily residential, or also allows for single-family residential, duplexes, those sorts of things. The proposal here is potentially to do either a mix or do all stick-built and some manufactured or all manufactured. Essentially, what we're doing today is just creating lots for those buildings. The concern is not so much with how they're constructed, but what they look like when they're done. So we did include some aesthetic considerations in the conditions of approval, as well as a landscape plan. So kind of that goes through your site geography. It's mostly surrounded by undeveloped land at this point. It's kind of on the edge of our city right now. So that is kind of the nature of Greenfield subdivision with nothing on it right now. They do have trees that will need to be cleared in advance of the development. They are proposing to leave a few in the southeast corner there to function partially as their native vegetation requirement, which is 10% of the site. As I mentioned, there is a landscape plan. This is not a PRD, but because they are proposing that open space to provide the stormwater facility and the native vegetation, as well as street trees and frontage improvements along Southwest 24th, they do have to have that landscape plan showing that meets the standards for all those. We did go through and review it, and it is part of the approval process of the preliminary plat. We do have transportation concurrency, which happens at a later date. That's not something you have to make a decision on. And as you mentioned, the SEPA did come through, and we did make the determination of non-significance on that one. Did not have any comments or appeal on that. So that is also a situation where you don't have to do any action on that. So essentially what we're looking at today is a preliminary plat. And we went through our full review on that. You can see that in the staff report. We feel that it meets all the standards for a preliminary plat, including public health, safety, general welfare, open space, drainage ways, transit stops are available nearby. It will be served by potable water and sewer from the city system and be connected to that as per the requirements of our code and our engineering staff. Parks, recreation, and playgrounds, we do have an open space provided within the subdivision. There is also very close by Fort Nugent Park within easy walking distance to this particular location. And then schools are served by the Oak Harbor School District. Honestly, I believe that those will mostly be buses picking up kids in that area. I don't imagine that they're going to be walking. I can't in my mind think of a close by school. So that will be a busing situation, and they do have the safe routes designations if necessary. So going through the review on the public interest being served by planning of the subdivision, we've determined that this is part of the comprehensive plan, the City of Oak Harbor comprehensive plan, which has designated this area as low intensity residential. This fits into that perfectly as an R2 zone district development. They're proposing 28 single family homes, which is at 5.8 units per acre. We round up to 6 units per acre, which is the minimum requirement for that zone district. And we do note that there is some leftover open space in tract 998 that is not being developed because of that temporary cul-de-sac, which when it is developed with additional lots will bring the site to about 6.7 units per acre. So we don't have an issue with that. The applicant's proposing public facilities that will serve each lot, such as public water and sewer, which also meets our in public interest and need portions of the staff report there. Also submitted with the preliminary plat were preliminary civil plans, draft CC&Rs, and other supporting documents. Those civil plans obviously not part of the approval process, but kind of there to show you what the thinking is as far as the design and everything. The landscape plan, we did go through and review that, and it meets the standards that we have in 1944 and 2160 of the Oak Harbor Municipal Code. We show a 10-foot landscape buffer along the street frontage, which is as required in 1946. And then we also have 5-foot park strips showing street trees along there. Perimeter vegetation is included with smaller trees that are suited more for rear yard areas. And then we have our native vegetation requirement, which has been covered by planting of new plants and also maintaining that existing small area of trees on the southeast corner of the property. We do note that details might be subject to change a little bit as far as species and locations of trees, depending on civil plans and construction, things like that. We have a little bit of flexibility built into our approval process to allow for that if necessary. And then finally, because we are kind of going away from the PRD process and allowing for smaller lots, we don't review house elevations through a PRD process. However, we do ask that they are provided so that we can include a general statement as far as design criteria as part of the preliminary plat and as part of the SEPA review. So the applicant provided several stick-built house plans as well as several modular or manufactured home plans, and we are happy with those particular designs. These are some of the kind of typical, neo-craftsman style look that we see a lot of lately. We did want to note on houses located on lots 13 through 18 that the house needs to be, and this is going to be a condition of approval, needs to be oriented towards the pedestrian walkway. We're trying to create a kind of pedestrian thoroughfare essentially between this subdivision and the neighboring subdivision that includes some sort of front porch or significant architectural feature, front door, and then a rear loading garage serving off of that private driveway that is to the back of that. The applicant has come through with some nice looking designs to meet that standard, so we're happy with that. And then, like I said, transportation concurrency and SEPA checklist are not requiring further action on your part. So essentially what we have is a subdivision that meets the standards of our code as far as we know. We do have, like I said, a question about some of the conditions regarding traffic and standards set forth by the state DOT. So we'll get into that. I'm sure Mr. Smith will want to discuss that a little bit, so we'll allow that too. But in conclusion, we went through our thorough review and analysis and determined that the applicant sufficiently addressed the requirements of the OHMC. And then we have our list of potential conditions of approval. And like you mentioned, there was a public comment that was expressed some concern about increased driveway or traffic on Ridgeway Drive. That is certainly a consideration, although that being said, the addition of these houses probably will not substantively change the nature of traffic through there, but it is something to take a look at. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to help out with those. And like I said, John Pollock from our engineering staff is also here to answer any technical questions.
Great. Thank you. I do have a few questions for you, Mr. Lindenberg. First off, I do have as Exhibit 4 the SEPA documents, except what I actually have is just the back and forth between Washington State Department of Transportation, or WashDOT, and then a response from the traffic consultant, Matt Palmer of Kimley Horn. What I don't seem to have is the SEPA checklist or the determination. Was it a MDNS then, a mitigated determination of non-significance ultimately that was made?
Yeah, apologies for that. I think that we probably mislabeled the exhibit. The exhibit should have been kind of more specific to the traffic situation. What happened there is we did a SEPA DNS, and then we had commentary from the state DOT that came in a little bit later. And we wanted to make sure that that was addressed, that the WashDOT was able to make a comment and, have that heard. And so essentially that's going back and forth with this. And like I said, I think that exhibit was mislabeled a little bit. But this is kind of part of that discussion as far as the conditions of approval regarding the traffic study.
Okay, well, but ultimately I don't seem to have a SEPA determination or a checklist or anything. So perhaps we can get those to me and include them as part of Exhibit 4, which is labeled SEPA documents, but you can verify. Can you just let me know the DNS? Can you just tell me, so ultimately the appeal period has passed now at this point, or any appeal would be, I assumed it would have been to me, I think, Carver, but can you just speak to that?
Yeah, so, the SEPA DNS was issued. We went through the appeal process or period and did not have any appeals or comments or anything. So it is completed process at this point. We didn't, like I said, there was no appeal on that would have come to you. But I will definitely get you a copy of that you can include in Exhibit 4 there.
Great. Yeah, if I can get the checklist and the determination, that's always helpful to have for the record. So thank you. And then maybe just you had brought up the site plan, and we heard reference to the Gary Oaks subdivision. But can you just speak a little more to the extent that it would appear that there are one or two potential wetlands, I believe, to the south on that site, but ultimately there was information, critical areas reports that were provided that were prepared, I believe, for that proposal. And I assume in part that's because, they're adjacent properties. And so the critical areas review of this property made it, useful and important to look at the work that occurred in studying the critical areas on the site to the south. And then the same kind of, in terms of that additional comment on traffic was, go ahead and factor in where Gary Oaks built out. Am I correct in my understanding? And can you just kind of elaborate on the interconnection of these things a little bit, Mr.
Sure. Is my screen share working for you? Were you able to see that aerial photo previously?
Previously I was, yeah.
Okay. So I'll put that back up here, and it has an overlay with the two subdivisions on it. So the lighter one is the Gary Oaks subdivision as proposed with their preliminary plat that was approved several years ago. The colors here are some of the kind of rough estimates for where wetlands may be. The Gary Oaks subdivision did go through and determine there's a wetland in this area and also a wetland in this area. And so there might be a little bit of a buffer right here that kind of extends onto their parcel, but I don't believe it really affects anything. Again, this is their stormwater facility right here, and then some of the native trees that they're going to be leaving as part of that requirement there. The other thing is the connection between the two. So you see the temporary cul-de-sac there that will connect to a proposed street in Gary Oaks. And then also the pedestrian walkway right here that connects to a pedestrian walkway at Gary Oaks. And again, the reason for having those pedestrian walkways is because when you have a block that is over a certain length, you have to have a pedestrian cut through there. So that's the requirement, and that's why that exists where it is. As far as wetlands on site, there aren't any on this site. There are on the Gary Oaks site, and that's why that kind of got triggered.
Got it. And maybe I missed, well, I guess technically where the wetlands is to the south, but we're looking south and east. But essentially,
right.
My understanding is that we have those critical areas studies reports that were done for Gary Oaks a few years ago. But then for this proposal, the applicant also provided additional information analyzing the site in relation to those off-site impacts. Does that sound accurate to you?
That's correct. Yeah, they're required to go through a critical areas review on their parcel. Like I said, there's the one that's kind of close by, so there's a little concern to make sure that there's no buffer areas that are going to extend into potential development areas and things like that.
Sure. And I believe that Soundview Consultants had provided a memorandum addressing those aspects of the proposal. So,
yes.
Okay, and then same with the traffic. That was the comment from Kimley Horn that came in later, sort of in response to DOT, which was essentially just factor Gary Oaks in as you're thinking about it. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and then again, I'm going to defer a little bit to the experts on this one. If Colin Smith would like to discuss that in his presentation, we can certainly go through that. We did have a response for him that went out, I believe, yesterday, and I can provide that information for you too, as well, if there's any sort of need to adjust conditions of approval or anything like that.
Okay. And then just going through a couple other aspects of the proposal. Well, I guess on exhibits, kind of random, but the noticing I have a affidavit of posting in Exhibit 5. Well, I have a photo of the site being posted, but then the affidavit is blank. I'm wondering if maybe the wrong item got included, or I don't know if you're able to look at Exhibit 5, but.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I presume we have a copy of that somewhere. That's probably just the blank version of it, and we can get the copy for you.
Sure. Okay, we'll just make sure we get the record up to date. Okay. Okay, and then and just to be clear, this site itself is R2, but all the surrounding properties themselves are R1 or Island County.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
I just got a chat notification from Patty. It says the signed copy is there. I'm looking for it now. Oh, it is. I just found it. It's further down. It's actually right before the photos is the signed copy of the affidavit. It is attached. That first one was just a blank copy, and the signed one is further in.
Okay, I wasn't sure if one was, I guess I assumed one was for the notice of hearing, the other was for the application, but okay, so it was just accidentally included, and that's fine. So no problem on that. I should have looked closer. I apologize.
No worries.
Okay. And then I did receive a thorough geotechnical analysis and stormwater report, but it appears that stormwater in part will be collected on site in an infiltration pond, and then those materials indicate that some of that will go toward essentially hydrologic recharge of that wetland to the southeast. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate. That's not my area of expertise. That sounds reasonable to me, so yes.
All right. Well then, and you can verify we didn't have any, again, you, at the outset, you noted there's been some communication with the applicant, which we'll get to here in a sec, but you can verify, apart from the one public comment that came in, there weren't any additional comments that came through in advance.
Yeah, that is correct. I'm not aware of any others.
Okay. Well, at this point, are there other members of staff you wanted to have me speak to before we move to our applicant representative?
I will leave that up to you. If you would like to speak to John first on the traffic study situation, or if you want to have the applicant kind of discuss that from his perspective and then have it as a kind of answer thing. I'll kind of leave that up to you how you want to direct that.
Sure. Why don't we start with the applicant, and then, as necessary, we can then come back around to Mr. Pollock if needed.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. And so, on behalf of the applicant, let's see if I can. Sorry, I know Colin Smith is one of the applicants, but I wasn't sure who would be the best person to speak to today. Is that you, Colin Smith? Or
yeah, I think it's going to be me. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, and I'll go ahead and swear you in, okay?
Okay. Well, on my video on, is that all right? Hand is up.
I envision your hands up. All right. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
Yes, sir, I do.
And if you could state and spell your name for the recording and explain who you are.
Yeah, it's Colin Smith. That's COLINSMITH. So I am the applicant, and in this case, represent the landowner as well.
Okay. Great. Thank you for being here. So this is your opportunity to kind of clarify anything, present any additional information you feel that myself and others should be aware of.
Okay. I don't really have anything new to add to the record, and just want to thank city staff for the succinct overview of the proposal and the review process and preparing the staff report, and thank you for your time reviewing the packet information as well. I know Ray was discussing the kind of conversations we were having about the Department of Transportation questions, and did reference that email sent yesterday afternoon by Mr. Pollock that kind of thoroughly reinforced, I guess, the condition, and I'm all on board with it now, so I have no objections to it. Just kind of spelled it out. I had some concerns, but plan to revise the traffic impact analysis per WSDOT's recommendations and move forward with there if it triggers a specific degradation of level of service, and coordinate with them on proper mitigation methods. So that was kind of cleaned up, I guess, from last week to yesterday evening. So I don't think there's anything really additional to discuss at this point.
Okay, so ultimately, in light of the conversation or communication that was provided from WashDOT about potentially, level service problems being triggered when thinking through the full build out of your project and Gary Oaks, I believe, there was a recommended condition, and you've been in conversation with staff, and ultimately, and I haven't heard from John Pollock yet. Perhaps it would have been better to hear from him. We'll do that in a sec. But it sounds like at this point, you're comfortable with what is being proposed in terms of a condition. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then before we move on, do you have other members of your team here you were hoping I would hear from?
Matt Palmer with Kinlinghorn wasn't available today to attend the hearing. Tom Abbott, I believe, is called in. He's the 425 number. He is the project engineer. I mean, if there's any questions for him and specifics to that, but he's kind of out of the loop on the traffic thing. So if you have any questions for him, he is here. But other than that, nobody else. It's just me and him.
Yeah, just would he be able to just give a brief overview on stormwater?
I think Tom's still here.
I have someone identified as
that number. Tom, you with us? I think John might also be able to do that pretty succinctly as well. I know that he's been reviewing the plans and in tune with them.
Got it. Okay, well then why don't we do this? So ultimately, you've read the staff report, you've read the recommended conditions of approval. Clearly, you've been in contact and back and forth with staff and understand what it is that they would recommend as conditions, and with the potential alterations that are being discussed with staff currently, which I'll be apprised of. Everything looks reasonable to you, and you don't see any concerns or issues with complying with the recommended conditions?
Yep, that's correct. We'll comply with what's been the guidelines that staff has provided. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Smith. So at this point, then, why don't we go to John Pollock, and he can probably help answer some questions.
I am here, sir.
Hi, thank you. I'm envisioning your hands up. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name for the recording and explain who you are.
Absolutely. My name is John Pollock. That's Jon. P as in Peter. OLLOCK. And I'm an engineering technician with the Public Works Department.
Great. I was going to say, if we can go backward, if we can start with just stormwater, and if you have expertise, but really I was just looking at an overview. My understanding was this would be, constructed under the 2019 manual that's in place, and it would meet all the requirements. And but was I correct in my basic explanation back and forth with Mr. Lindenberg earlier?
Yes, sir. The site is with a stormwater report that is in compliance with the 19 manual, the Department of Ecology Stormwater Manual for Western Washington, and that is in compliance with our Municipal Code 203300. And the designed plan, the calculations on that are all in sufficient compliance with what we anticipate for infiltration after some treatment and detention. Generally speaking, the stormwater generated by the site, the hard surfaces of the site, will travel from north to south to a detention facility on the southeast corner of the proposed plat, and it will then be treated through a filtration system and detained in a structure and then released slowly through a control device into a dispersion trench and apparatus there, and will be infiltrating back into the ground towards the south.
towards, and ultimately toward that wetland as well, in part, right?
In part into the ground and probably overland once it hits the restrictive layer to that wetland, of course, naturally.
Sure. Just trying to ensure that, we have a certain amount of sort of hydrologic recharge. I know that in the 50s, things were done differently with, giant storm ponds made out of concrete. But now the goal, as you know, is clearly to try to ensure that as new development occurs, that we mimic natural processes and ensure that resources like wetlands are not, totally deprived of.
Yes, sir. The report and the calculations all show that it will achieve the requirements for ensuring that the wetland is neither starved of water nor overfed. So
Excellent.
this is a good design, and we're quite pleased with what they have proposed.
Thank you. I like your wording. Neither starved nor overfed. Okay. With that, then the other issue that not that the stormwater had been an issue, but the one issue that had been brought up, and apparently there has been kind of back and forth with planning staff and the applicant, but you were going to help elucidate and explain where things stand in terms of traffic and the proposed condition, et cetera. So if you could speak to that, Mr. Pollock.
Certainly. So the city has a requirement built into our municipal code in Chapter 11 to ensure that we have mitigated level of service impacts to the state highway. In that, the CEPA process allows for other agencies to comment, and WashDOT did provide a comment regarding the level of service impacts towards the Southwest 24th and SR20 intersection. As defined in our municipal code, we are targeting a level of service E for all intersections on the SR20 corridor. And so, based upon what was turned in as the initial traffic study for this proposal, the level of service would have reached a level of service E. WashDOT is concerned only slightly that the original study was performed in December, which is not a peak traffic month for our city. So they are asking for a seasonal adjustment of an additional 12%. And so the direction from city staff is to request that the applicant team please recalculate their traffic study for that factor and to ensure that we do not drop that intersection to LOSF. If the level of service F is achieved from this development alone, then this applicant should design mitigations in coordination with WashDOT to ensure that the level of service E is restored or maintained. Beyond that, with the ongoing items with the neighboring parcel and project, the traffic studies there, that development should be responsible for whatever mitigation factors whenever they actually do approach construction and approval of civil plans to move forward. They already have a few restrictions on them from WashDOT regarding the intersections, including turn lanes and turn pockets. I don't anticipate that this applicant will find that they are going to be solely responsible for the level of service impacts that WashDOT was concerned about.
Sure. So just, I guess, bigger picture, but essentially, the applicant will be making improvements on their own, on the property where this project improved, including frontage improvements. In this case, the nature of the site, it's sort of not a ton of frontage on the street. It's more of a kind of narrow. It comes off the road, but essentially they would be paying traffic impact fees as required by the municipal code. But what you're talking, excuse me, my apologies. Sometimes under review with concurrency with SEPA, if there's a triggering event where you're causing levels of service to fall to a certain level, or in the case of the city of Oak Harbor, there's also some additional requirements in your code to think about impacts on sort of corridors that go to the freeway. That could then trigger additional mitigation requirements, whether that's additional fees or actually installing improvements off-site to address those. Am I grasping that right, Mr. Potter?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Just for clarification, the city does not do a dedicated fee for the WashDOT Highway 20 corridor improvement. So it would rely entirely upon actual construction of improvements out there.
Got it. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply there was a fee specific to that. There is a general traffic mitigation fee, though, correct?
Yes, sir, there is. Those are calculated based on the number of dwelling units in a residential unit, or residential development, rather. And those are to the general street system throughout the city, not necessarily directly on the highway itself, as that is maintained by WashDOT. So there's where we can and cannot spend that specific traffic impact fee to be mindful of.
Sure. So I guess that was my next sort of question without getting too far in the weeds. But, as you just stated, there's only so much the city has the power to address in terms of, you can't do things with WashDOT's property, but is 24th or any of the area roads right in the vicinity part of the city's 6-year transportation improvement or TIP, where we know there are potential, projects in the works that are intended to alleviate some of these problems, or is it just until a major change occurs with the highway? I'll let you speak to that.
Certainly. So the city does not have a proposed road other than the connections that are anticipated for the Gary Oaks subdivision that's adjacent to this proposal. We do anticipate that when the neighboring parcels to the west of this proposal annex into the city, that they will widen that stub section of Southwest 24th Avenue from its current 1-lane configuration, and we will be able to widen that to 2 lanes. We are currently evaluating the possibility of allowing 2-way traffic on it as a 1-lane road using a concept called a Suggested-Struck, which is to allow the 2-way direction on it, and that's an engineering term that we are borrowing from Holland, where they have a significant number of 1-way roads, or 1-lane roads rather, but they offer 2-lane travel for very light traffic and also supporting pedestrian connections across it as well. But we would anticipate any neighboring development to the west to widen that road into a full 2-lane capacity and thereby increase the grid capacity through that area, making a 24th through Ridgeway Drive connection more feasible within the city limits.
Okay. What was that term?
That is a Suggested-Struck.
Okay, I hadn't heard that one. Suggested-Struck. I've finally wrapped my head around Woonerfs. The Dutch have done a lot apparently in terms of, providing new concepts and ideas. But Suggested-Struck, I like it. All right.
Yep, and the engineering department is evaluating that little section of road there to see if that is a possibility for us to consider doing.
Okay, and they're going to send you to Holland to go look into this, I assume, right?
We have already just kind of Google Earthed our way around and
Try to get you a vacation, John Pollock, but it's okay. So thank you. So ultimately, though, just to be clear, I think a revised condition has been recommended. Is that your understanding, or?
I'm not certain, as the conditions written for this things are Mr. Lindenberg's wheelhouse and not mine. I can only provide advice.
I will go back to Mr. Lindenberg, but did you have anything further or final in terms of the engineering aspects you wanted to share?
I would just like to express my gratitude to Colin and his engineering team that he has been working with here. It has been a very straightforward process for the review, and I look forward to getting this project out the door and into the field and underway constructing. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. So at this point, I'll go back to Mr. Lindenberg just to answer that question, and then we'll see if there are members of staff that were, members of the public, not staff, that were interested in testifying. So, Mr. Lindenberg, the question just had to do with, I believe currently it's proposed or recommended condition 8 is what addresses this topic, but it sounds like there may be agreed alterations to that recommended condition between the applicant and staff, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I kind of left that one a little bit flexible as far as allowing for, a discussion, if you will. So this one's kind of tough, and I would propose maybe that I could talk to our staff and Mr. Smith and come back with a proposed revised condition number 8 for you to include in the record if you'd like to do that.
Well, sorry, maybe I misunderstood. I thought when you were testifying earlier, my understanding was that there may be a revised condition, but if you're comfortable with it being written as is, I'm just trying to get what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with it if as it is the way it is now. It sounds like Mr. Smith is comfortable with it, and I believe that John kind of agrees with what I've stated there. So if everybody's okay with it, then certainly we can leave it as is. Like I said, it was kind of intentionally written to work for everybody, hopefully. So.
Okay. Well, so, the way I read it is it does provide some discretion where because I haven't, my understanding is it was a DNS, not an MDNS. So even though this technically is under the heading for SEPA, this wasn't a required SEPA mitigation measure, correct, Mr.
Correct,
Willard?
yeah. John let me know that engineering is okay with that condition as it is. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those that is under the SEPA heading there, but not necessarily a SEPA condition.
Yep, and I asked because there's a legal issue where the hearing examiner, we don't believe, there's a little gray area just in the last year, but generally I do not alter SEPA conditions that have, unless there's been a SEPA appeal, and then I would have the authority to do so if that appeal goes to me. So I was just making sure this was not again, required mitigation measure issued as part of SEPA. It sounds like it was not. So the concept being, sounds like folks are on board, i.e. the applicant, planning staff, engineering staff, with this as written. If I were to alter it, I might just say the applicant shall coordinate with city staff and WashDOT. And the discretion there then is, on your all's end to sort it out if anything further is needed, would be the idea.
Yeah,
Make sense?
That makes sense, yes.
Okay, so with that, I was going to see, do we have a sense of if we have others in the room that are not members of staff? I know it's...
Hey, Mr. Rees, may I jump back in?
Yeah, Mr. Smith, before we go, yep, that's fine. We'll go to Colin Smith, and I'm going to see if there are members of the public.
So Tom Abbott is on the call. I believe he is internally muted. He said he was trying to talk. Is there a way that you can check, or can Patty check that he is muted through his phone somehow?
I think if he had *6 or *9, but is he 8324?
Oh, yeah, his mic just came off, so it looks like he's here. I just wanted him to be able to speak if he'd like to.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, did you want to testify today?
John actually did a great summary. When it came to stormwater, it appeared that I was muted. On my end, city's end, doesn't matter. But, John actually gave a really good explanation, so I don't think I have anything further to add. Thank you.
Okay, then I won't treat you as sworn in, but thank you for sharing. So, Colin Smith, we just wanted to make sure he had an opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Okay, and then with that, I was going to say, it's sometimes a challenge to tell who's staff, who's not, who's with the applicant. Ray, are you able to tell if we have anyone that
the only name I don't recognize here is Heather Spohr.
Okay. So Heather Spohr.
Hi there. Yeah, my name is Heather Spohr. I'm a staff for the Swinomish Indian tribal community, and I'm just here listening in as an interested party. Thank you.
Okay, so no testimony today.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you though for being here. So then, remember, based on that, then no others that you're aware of, and I don't believe there was anyone in the council chambers. Is that right?
No, we can ask Kim if there's anybody in the council chambers, but it looks like everybody else is city staff here.
There's nobody in the council chambers.
Okay. So then, Ray Lindenberg, so it sounds like there's no revised, we're not waiting on something to be prepared and sent to me. Let's start there. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll just have those additional pieces of information that we discussed earlier to you in the email.
Excellent. Yeah, these are not new exhibits. These are just things that, the record, electronic transmission, sometimes these things happen, but we'll make sure all the things that ought to be in there are in there, but certainly they've been discussed in the staff report and today. And I believe then I have everything I need ultimately to make a decision on this proposal. And so my intent is to do so here in the next couple of weeks. And as noted in the staff report, I'll be addressing the preliminary plat and have discussion of the landscape plan and the housing elevations. But I will not specifically get into transportation concurrency or SEPA, although I will reference them. So with that, I think we can conclude our first item. We do have a second item at 11, and I don't recall, Patty, is it the same login or not?
It is the same.
Okay, I'm going to log out because I don't know what's going on with my screen being strange. But in terms of this first matter, thank you to those members of city staff that were available to participate, and John Pollock for giving me a whole new Dutch planning term to use and look up when I have free time. And thank you to the applicant team and others that participated or were available to participate, and any members of the public or tribal communities in the area that were here today. So with that, we'll come back on at 11 for the second item on the agenda. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Testing.
I can hear you in council chambers.
Okay. Okay, well, Ray, are you back?
I am. As soon as I can find my unmute button, I'm here.
I rebooted my video, we'll see, but as according to you, I didn't appear orange, and I don't mean orange like spray tan or a former politician. I mean, my whole screen had a weird orange tint at various times, so some weird filter on Ring, I don't know. But with that, I think we can go ahead and get going on the second item. Are we recording?
We are.
We are. Okay, great. So just to make it official. And good morning. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Oak Harbor Hearing Examiner back to order. For the record, today is August 29th, 2023, now just after 11 a.m. We have one item on the agenda for 11, and this is the, I'm going to butcher it every time, but the Angel de la Creatividad, Angel of Creativity proposal. And ultimately, this does involve a request for a conditional use permit, site plan review, a shoreline substantial development permit, and a shoreline variance to allow for installation of a 37-foot tall art piece to be installed at Flintstone Park. So for those that may not have been here earlier, my name is Andrew Reeves, and I serve as the city's hearing examiner. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent, in this case, with the county's, with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, and critical areas ordinances. And then because we are also looking at a shoreline substantial development permit and shoreline variance, ensure that the proposal is consistent with our state's shoreline master program, Shoreline Management Act, and the city's adopted shoreline master program, including the specific requirements for approval of a shoreline variance. So to that end, I received several exhibits in advance of the hearing that I had an opportunity to review. These include a staff report prepared by city staff addressing the criteria and various aspects of the proposal, and the application materials themselves, and this includes information about sort of a little bit about the history, information on sort of what the project looks like, some background information on the park itself, and analysis of the proposal. And there's been earlier review, as it were, through various public processes that information has been provided as well. Exhibit 3 includes zoning and vicinity maps. Exhibit 4 is the notice materials that were provided in relation to the application as well as today's hearing. And then I also received in Exhibit 5 several public comments. I think it was about 4 or 5 public comments expressing, for the most part, concern about the proposal and the proposed structure. So I'll go ahead and admit those exhibits into the record. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll address admitting additional exhibits at that time. All testimony, like before, will be under oath or affirmation. And this case, well, I guess it depends. There's a couple routes potentially for appeal of my decision. Depending on what aspects, it could theoretically be appealed through the Growth Management Act and LUPA, or in terms of the shoreline variance, to the Shoreline Hearings Board. So we'll just hope there are no appeals because those things can get complicated for a project like this. But I do note that I am ultimately not the final say, and because of the shoreline variance, in fact, Department of Ecology would need to have final sign-off in terms of any aspects of the proposal related to the shoreline variance. So quite a bit of overlay. Ultimately, though, not a particularly large project, as it were, but a lot going on in terms of jurisdiction, et cetera. So with that, as before, just noting the order that we'll typically follow. First, we'll hear from planning staff, and that'll give kind of an overview. And then I believe we'll hear from another member of the planning team, as it were, or city team, project manager, I believe, in this case, because ultimately this is I think sort of the city's involved in the project. So then we'll see if there are members of the public interested in testifying, and they would have that opportunity. And then if necessary, we'll come back around to hear from the applicant and planning staff. So with that, Mr. Lindenberg, are you presenting on behalf of the city?
I will be, yes.
Excellent. Okay, was that right that we'll be hearing from another member of city staff, I believe Gideon Kaufman as the applicant representative, is that correct?
That is correct. I might be calling on Dennis Lefevre to go over some of our shoreline stuff as well. He's also a planner here.
Excellent. Okay, so you were sworn in earlier, but just in case someone's coming in later or listening to only this part of the audio, if you could just explain who you are and state your name for us.
I'm Ray Lindenberg, Lindenburg. I am a senior planner at the City of Oak Harbor, and I'm operating as the project manager on the review process here.
Great, thank you. And did my, not very articulate, but my explanation of sort of the exhibits that have been provided track with what you were hoping I would look at?
It was very articulate and perfect, I would say.
I don't know about perfect, but thank you. So with that, I'll let you go ahead, Mr. Lindenberg.
So yeah, this is, as you mentioned, kind of a complex review process. We have 4 different actual pieces of this puzzle. 2 of them, as you mentioned, are city reviews, and 2 of them are shoreline reviews. The ones that I'm going to present first are a conditional use permit and a site plan review for the city. And then, like I said, I'm going to try and lean on Dennis a little bit for some of the shoreline presentation stuff. But essentially what we have is a 37-foot tall art piece. It's a statue known as the Angel of Creativity. And I'm not going to try and butcher the Spanish because it's been too long. But the reason that we're here today really is because the maximum height limit for an open space or a public facilities zone district is 35 feet. So the code says that we can go and apply for a conditional use permit for something that's over height if it's determined to be a cultural or artistic piece. And through the process of selecting a site, the city council did do that and made that determination. So that's why we're here requesting a conditional use, or why the applicant is here requesting conditional use and site plan review, as well as that shoreline substantial development and the shoreline variance also relating to the height limit. So
if I can stop you just very briefly. Same, again, 4 things ultimately. We've got a conditional use permit, and as you noted, specifically that has to do with assessing the height, because again, it's not the kind of thing we see every day, but here we're, essentially, as you just testified, in the public facility zoning designation, a conditional use permit can be used to assess something like something being taller than would normally be allowed. And then the site plan review traditionally would be an administrative review, but that has been consolidated. Is that right?
Correct, yeah. And in the staff report, I touched on that a little bit. Our code allows for essentially packaging of projects together when you have a type 3 review, which is your conditional use and your shoreline variance, and in a type 2, which is the staff level review of the site plan and the shoreline substantial development permit. When all those things come in together, we have you review it as an entire package for efficiency's sake, essentially.
Sure. And that's where I was headed. So I think we're on the same page. And so same thing with the shoreline, which is that the SSDP, or shoreline substantial development permit, at this point, normally the hearing examiner wouldn't be involved. That would be type 2. And in fact, that permit is not necessarily related to any issues with height. That just has to do with, something being constructed within, the shoreline jurisdiction. There's certain triggering either dollar amounts or, access being temporarily hindered, et cetera, to the shoreline. That requires an SSDP. But then the shoreline variance is also related to the height, and essentially the height is what I'm focused on in many respects in both cases, both for the CUP and for the SVAR, shoreline variance. But for the CUP, I'm looking at the criteria for a CUP under the municipal code, and then for the shoreline variance, I'm looking at, the criteria under the adopted shoreline master program that the city of Oak Harbor has adopted in conjunction or as required by our state's Shoreline Master Act. Does that sound accurate?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to stop there and make sure everyone was on the same page. So
Sure.
with that, Mr. Lindenberg, I'll let you continue.
Okay, so I'm going to put up on my screen a quick overview of the site itself. If you look at essentially kind of the larger picture, this is SR20 as it goes through the city of Oak Harbor. This is Pioneer Way in the downtown area. And then the proposed site is located in Flintstone Park, which is a public park, public facilities zone district, located right in this area here. There is an existing boardwalk and walkway that goes along the beach that continues through here. And then there is a public pier that extends out into the water from here. So that's essentially the location there. We have some neighboring condo complexes over here. That is in the CBD 2 zone district, which allows for residential uses over here. And then across the street, we have a mix of commercial, residential, office type uses in the downtown area. The site itself was created out of fill that was dredged from the harbor in the middle of the 1900s, essentially. Not exact dates certain on that, but that entire area that you saw in the aerial photo was underwater or tidelands previous to that. So essentially what we have there is brand new land that's not been utilized for anything but open space in a park in the past, because before that time it was all underwater. So that is the kind of physical attributes of the site there. The background is, and I'm going to try and boil this down as much as I can without losing too much information, but essentially what happened here is the city was offered the gift of a piece of art, essentially, by a sculptor and an art collector, and they're following that art collector's estate. And so what happened is the gift was offered. The city was tried to determine a location for this piece, and it was originally considered to be in Windjammer Park. There was some discussion of that and some controversy from the public and from staff, and the stakeholder parties determined that the location at Flintstone Park would be a better place for it. And so where we're at right now is the city council made that determination that that's where it was to go. They signed an agreement, a professional services agreement, to put it in to Flintstone Park. And so essentially that is the determination that it meets the standards for becoming an art piece or a cultural artifact, essentially, that can be over height if it gets a conditional use approval. And the conditional use approval specifically comes from the section in 1920.795 that talks specifically about public facilities zone districts, and it is able to be over height from that set of criteria that's in there. So the criteria are shown, I'm sorry, I'm quoting the wrong section, it's 1928.065. And I went through the kind of review and the process in the staff report shown in italics there, but the criteria are essentially A through D, and those criteria are: 1, that it can be demonstrated to be safe; 2, or B, is located more than 30 feet away from the nearest property line; C, it does not materially impair the view of surrounding properties; and number 4, it does not materially increase fire or other safety risks. And so going through that review and analysis, the demonstration that it can be safe is essentially found through the ability to provide engineered drawings and engineered plans that it's not going to be in danger of falling over or creating a hazard in that way. So the process by which that'll happen is through our building department and engineering department will review the proposed footings and the foundation for the structure itself. And we feel that we can demonstrate safety based on that. It would be similar to any other building or structure that's constructed, as we have our building and engineers, building department engineering staff take a look at it to make sure that it is going to be sufficient for the location. The second one, being located more than 30 feet away from the nearest property line, it is approximately 100 to 105 feet to nearest property lines, depending on which side we're looking at and exactly where it ends up being located, but it is well beyond that 30-foot requirement. As far as materially impairing the view of surrounding properties, essentially what we have is if you are to look at the site from the street, you would see this structure, and it would be kind of like you were to extend your arm and look at your thumb from arm's length. It is a very narrow but tall structure, but it does not occupy a significant portion of the field of view. It is, like I said, 37 feet tall. It does flare out at the top where the actual, impactful part of the art piece is. But if you're standing on the street and looking out to the park, you still see all of the water. You still see the hill on Mailer's Point in the background. You still see mountains off to the side. You still see all the things that you would normally see, the boats in the harbor, all that sort of thing. If you're standing up right next to it, of course, your view is going to change. If you're standing on the water side of this proposed structure, you're going to see it and everything behind it, because again, it's a very narrow portion of your field of view. If you choose not to look at it, you cannot look at it. It doesn't, occupy an entire huge space there from where we are looking at scenic views or city views or marina, etc. Also, from the roadway itself, a lot of the view of the actual sculpture will be obscured during the summertime by some mature trees that are planted along the street there. So the actual view of the art piece itself is going to have to be, you're going to have to want to look at it. It's not something that's going to, like I said, just kind of occupy a large amount of visual space for people. For the condos next door, most of the windows that view onto the park there are smaller windows, presumably bathrooms and things like that. I don't know what the floor plans of those particular units are, but they are not going to be significantly viewing the art piece itself or directed in that way. So that is letter C, and then letter D does not materially increase fire or other safety risks. It's made of metal. It should not be a fire risk. Other safety risks would, be taken care of by number one and the engineering and making sure it stands and is a safe structure, essentially. So that hopefully, demonstrates the compliance with the conditional use. And this conditional use permit, that specific section, is for just artistic and cultural resources or facilities, structures, etc. Other conditional use permits, such as drive-throughs and things like that, have different standards that are found in different sections of the code. So this one will be specifically looking at 1928.065.
And even more specific, right? I mean, it's conditional use permits for structures deemed as cultural or historic, or a sculpture or sculptural or artistic in the public facilities district. So this is about as specific a code provision as one can find, I suppose. But looking at that provision, it does not say, go look at all the other CUP criteria for traditional CUP, and these are in addition. It is, nope, in this specific instance, this is what you here, Examiner Reeves, should be looking at. Am I understanding? It's a little unique, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding accurately what the process is. Is that right?
Yeah, your interpretation is spot on. It's a very narrow application for sites within public facilities, which are typically parks. And so that's what we're looking at today.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah, your second application is going to be the Type 2 site plan review. And then we have the criteria found in 1948, general evaluation for site plan approval. We have a comprehensive plan designation there with if the proposed site plan and other application information is appropriate or consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The project is located within the public facilities land use category. That's described as including schools, college, churches, government offices, utility structures, and public parks. And as I mentioned previously, the city council determined that this is an appropriate site for it. Public art is found throughout city parks in the city of Oak Harbor. So we feel that it is a consistent use for that land use district. Number two, the criteria for zoning, again, public facilities zone. And again, I point back to the same thing, that it's a consistent kind of secondary use in a public park as far as having artwork in the park itself. We have a number of other examples. We have the Flintstone car, which is located in that same park. We have the Dutch boy statue sweeping at Windjammer Park, and we have a windmill replica located at Holland Gardens Park. These are all kind of similar type, artistic and cultural type things that are located within existing city parks, and we consider that to be a consistent and subordinate use within a city park itself. Number three, the natural environment. This is a fairly highly developed urban park on the waterfront, so we feel that this is consistent fitting into that, and it needs to fit in with the section 20, Title 20 of the code and the SEPA 19711. You're located in a shoreline jurisdiction, but an existing developed neighborhood, so again, we feel it's consistent for that. Public services, we don't require any public services for the art piece. No water or sewer is going to be generated here. There should be very little change to the stormwater runoff on that, and we don't require fire protection for it either. There is existing fire protection for neighboring parcels and properties located nearby. Appropriate street improvements, don't see any need for that. It's an existing city park. There's already a driveway with parking included in there. If there is any changes, it would be consistent with a different set of permitting. This is not, including new streets or new driveways, parking lots, et cetera. So we're not reviewing that right now. The subject property is owned by the city of Oak Harbor. We don't have any easements, dedications, or other land issues that we need to address here. And then provisions made for access and maintenance. Park maintenance is provided by the city of Oak Harbor. Any further agreement with regard to the maintenance of the sculpture itself is going to be between the city of Oak Harbor and stakeholder parties. So that has all been addressed. Again, existing public facilities and services provided already. It's an existing public park. We don't have a phasing plan for it, so pretty much what we're saying here is we might have slight changes in the site plan after final review of construction plans, any kind of civil changes, et cetera. Staff will review those to determine if they're compliance with the approved site plan. We have the caveat there that we always do, that the project needs to be in substantial or general conformance with the approved set of plans. So what you approve today might make minor changes of a foot or two of location, things like that, but nothing significant beyond that. So that brings us to our shoreline permits. And Dennis, I'm going to call on you if you can say a few words about that. And Dennis will need to be sworn in, I presume.
Sure. And excuse me, right before we go to Dennis, though, I just wanted to ask, and can you hear me? My video seems to have frozen on my end. I'm going to try to reboot that. But can you hear me okay, Ray Lindenberg?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm not sure what's happening with Ring today, but essentially the zone itself, the height
traditionally allowed would be 35, and this request is for about 37, 37 and a half. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so had there not been a request for that extra 2.5 feet, and I understand that with an art piece, you probably can't just shave 2.5 feet off, but were this slightly shorter, we would not have this process, at least the CUP portion. Is that accurate?
Correct. We would be processing a site plan review through staff level if it was at 34 feet 11 inches. Yeah.
And I think we'll hear from Dennis here in a sec. I think it's the same case with the shoreline. I think 35 is also the height limitation in the particular urban public facility shoreline designation. But he's about to speak to that, I believe. So we'll get him sworn in, and we'll probably come back to you later. But thank you, Ray Lindenberg. Yes. So with that, Dennis Lefebvre.
Yes.
Hi, I can't see you, but I'm envisioning your hands up. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name for the audio and explain your role here at the City of Oak Harbor.
My name is Dennis Lefebvre. It's DennisLefevre. I'm a part-time senior planner with the city, work 2 days a week with the city.
Great, thank you. And so I don't get the name wrong. The F is not, there's no additional capitalization, right? It's capital L-E-F-E-V-R-E, correct?
It's a small F, that's correct.
Small F. I thought that was right, and I recognize the name. I know you've appeared before me over the years in the past, but I think it's been a little while. So thank you for being here. I hope. With that, I'm going to let you go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So thank you for being here. Go right ahead.
Right. The two applications that pertain to the shoreline, as you mentioned, are the shoreline substantial development permit and also the shoreline variance because of the height. As you know, we have the shoreline master program, which is based on state law. That was adopted in 2021 in June and approved by Ecology in August of that. The designation in the shoreline plan is urban public facility, much similar to our zoning. The recreational development, which is Flintstone Park, is a permitted use. The sculpture is actually under the landscaping definition, which is a permitted activity within recreational developments. And it calls out specifically outdoor artwork in that definition as defined in the staff report. So the use is a permitted use essentially in that shoreline designation. When looking at shoreline, the substantial development permit, the height was the issue that stood out. The height limitation in that zone or that designation is 35 feet. The structure itself is 37. So we had to engage in the shoreline variance application process. The applicant did that. There's specific criteria, much similar to what Ray went through in his report, that the applicant needed to meet in conformance with our Shoreline Master Program and the State Shoreline Management Act. The applicant did that. Staff has concurred with some of the responses to, well, all of the responses to the variance criteria, which is included in the staff report. I won't go through verbatim unless you have specific questions. And you are accurate that your recommendation on this shoreline variance will be packaged up and sent to Ecology for their review and approval, conditioning or denial on this variance. As part of the Shoreline Master Program, we did look at the view study as a potential issue with this, but as Ray articulately indicated that we, as far as the shoreline view concerns, are fairly nominal with this structure. So we did not require a view study as part of the application process. With that, unless you have some questions, I'd be happy to answer. That concludes the shoreline portion of the staff report.
Sure, and just to make sure I didn't misstate anything, my understanding is that at this point, shoreline substantial development permits, or SSDPs, are generally a type 2 or administrative review process. But as you just testified to, much like with the zoning designation, with the shoreline designation, there's generally a 35-foot height limitation. And because of that, that's where the shoreline variance, and that variance being specific to the height, has been requested. So essentially, again, consolidation, as it were, of the two types of shoreline permits has been the process that is being used. Did I state that accurately earlier?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, and then it's a weird question, and honestly, I wouldn't have thought of this until recently, except I am addressing a matter in a different jurisdiction where, for various reasons, there was a project that had a CUP and a shoreline element, and there was a lot of confusion later down the road. I don't think to do with me and my decision, but because of the way things happened. Ultimately, there were aspects of a CUP that I think someone probably wanted to appeal through LUPA, but they didn't, and then the Shoreline Hearings Board heard the shoreline aspects. My question, as weird as this is, and if you don't have an answer, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask while I have a longtime shoreline planning expert here. Would it be beneficial or helpful to sort of parse this out into two decisions, meaning I would issue a decision on this project that is specific to the two shoreline permits and a companion decision on the CUP and the site plan review? Traditionally, I would do it all together, and I promise this wouldn't cost the city or the applicant any more money if I break it into two. But I'm just thinking in terms of, were there an appeal, knock on wood, I wouldn't want there to be. By doing it that way, you could theoretically, ensure that there are less problems, in my mind. But maybe I'm overthinking this. But if you have thoughts, I know this is a strange, maybe you have never thought about this, but I hadn't until recently. But Dennis, any thoughts on whether it would be beneficial or not? Out of curiosity.
I think that would be beneficial, actually, since the shoreline variance will take one additional step than the land use conditional use permit. I think that would be a good way to approach this.
Okay, and I'll ask Mr. Lindenberg in a moment. But I do this with SEPA at times. If there's, say, a SEPA appeal that the hearing examiner, have to hear as a consolidated process with the underlying permit, what I'll do is make it clear that, all the testimony is theoretically applicable to both, and the decisions I issue simultaneously, so they come out the same day and they reference each other in a footnote. All the exhibits are applicable to both. It's just that, one decision in this case will be the CUP and the site plan review, and there'll be a footnote right up front that says, this was consolidated in one hearing, and please see companion decision. And then the companion decision will be the SVAR and the SSDP, and it'll say see the companion decision. But the thought, as I think you immediately understood, was that God forbid there were an appeal of either, it would be clear both for the applicant, the appellants, everyone involved, that there are technically two processes, and if there's a way to, separate them out, which I think in this case it could very easily be done, it might make life easier. So we're on the same page, it sounds like.
Yes, agreed, definitely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, in terms of this, I don't have any further specific questions. I think you've delineated and explained everything well, and the staff report is quite thorough in addressing the criteria. And sort of same question as I had for Mr. Lindenberg, which is if, this was 2 feet shorter, we wouldn't be here, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, meaning that there would still be a review process, obviously, and the SSDP would theoretically still be, I think, necessary, because this is not one of those things, I think, that is automatically exempt, like a single-family residence. I don't think the Shoreline Master Program or Shoreline Management Act has directly addressed artwork, so this would still have review by city staff, as has already occurred as part of this process, but it would be an administrative permit ultimately. Is that right?
That is correct. It did not meet any of the requirements of the exemptions within our SMP or state management act.
Right.
It's not a repair or maintenance of a facility, and it exceeded the dollar amount by the state.
Right, several million or whatever. We won't get into that. That's art. Art is one of those things. It's hard to put a price on, but I certainly am familiar with the sculptor. And my mother, who is an art history person back in the day, I asked her, and she said, we took you. You saw one of his sculptures up in Glasgow, I think, when we were younger. And so, anyways. Point being, it was more than 7,000 or whatever the new dollar amount. I think with inflation, it's 10,000 these days for an SSDP, but more than that, probably on the materials alone. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it exceeds that dollar amount for sure.
We'll go from there to whatever the price actually could be. So, in terms of the shoreline, I think you have explained everything that needed to be explained. I have no further questions for you. Anything further you wanted to add, though, before we move on?
No, but thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to the getting confident in a moment. But Ray Lindenberg, before we do that, I just want to let you weigh in on that curveball I threw about 2 companion decisions.
I think that's probably a good idea. I don't see any negative coming out of that, and I see positives. So I would say let's go for that. And
like I said, all the testimony will be the same. I'll include the testimony just now from Dennis as part of the CP, and I'll include your testimony in the SSDP SFAR side of it. It's just a way to procedurally try to make things easier. And again, I certainly am not trying to rack up the bill or anything. It'll be the same cost, you 1 or 2. It's, I just think it'll hopefully make things easier is my thought. But.
Yeah, and just kind of a very quick conclusion. Dennis provided great analysis there. He's our shoreline expert, so I wanted to make sure he was able to kind of do that and explain anything that might specifically come out of it. But I just wanted to, in conclusion kind of thing, just reiterate that, we're looking essentially at a height increase of 2 feet here. We're not here to judge the aesthetic merits of the sculpture itself. It is, a tall structure, and it's going to be met with, opinions. And those opinions, unfortunately, don't really have any bearing on what we're doing here. What we're doing here is asking if it can be 2 feet higher than what the code says through this process. And so that's where we're at here. We have a recommended action of conducting the public hearing and approving the following 4 different permits. As you noted, separating those out into the city and the shoreline ones, perfectly appropriate. And then we have 3 brief conditions of approval that it be consistent with the attached site plan and no more than 37 feet in height. If there is any lighting that's proposed, that it not be directed towards neighboring residential properties or create undue glare or safety hazards, et cetera. And that the applicant coordinate with city staff on construction plan review and subsequent approval. Essentially what we're saying there is we make sure that it be engineered properly and get all the proper permits once we get past this stage here.
Certainly, and we'll come all the way back around. We have yet to hear from technically our applicant representative. I recognize that we have folks wearing multiple hats today, and then we'll just want to make sure and check if there are members of the public interested in testifying. But I certainly myself, asked the question of, we're only here technically on some level because of the 2-foot difference in height. It did trigger a CUP under the zoning code, Mr. Lindberg, which, again, the criteria are very unique for this case, and aesthetics were brought in to the extent of not do you like what it looks like, but will it fundamentally obstruct views, and you already testified to that. And this is not a giant wall that's being proposed. It's quite narrow, in terms of comparable to a tree with not a ton of foliage. I'm trying to think. I've seen wireless communication facilities proposed in public parks that certainly, I think everyone would agree, are less aesthetically pleasing. So one way or the other. So are we on the same page? I didn't mean to interrupt, and ultimately I do want to hear from our quote applicant representative, Gideon Kaufman. But are we good to move forward there?
I think we're good. We draw a pretty bright line between myself and Gideon as far as applicant and reviewer. So I will allow him to answer any applicant questions, and I will sit back and watch.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to get Gideon Kaufman sworn in as our applicant representative. So Gideon, I can't see you, but I don't know if that's my end or your end, but I'm envisioning your hand is up. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just clearly state and then spell your name for the recording.
Yeah, my name's Gideon Kaufman, and that's GIDEONCAUFFMAN. And I'm an archaeologist and project manager for the city of Oak Harbor.
Okay. I did not realize archaeologist as well. So thank you for letting me know that. But in terms of, I guess, post-apocalypse, if this project's approved, this is one of those things, that an archaeologist in 10,000 years from another species might find were this to be approved. But as dark as a way to begin as that was, this would be kind of your chance to further explain anything, clarify anything that was confusing or has now been confused, and any further information you'd like to provide.
Yeah, Mr. Reeves, I actually have a artist rendering that I would like to submit for exhibit. This was done by Gregory Hancock, and it was done after material was submitted to yourself. So may I do a share screen?
Please do. And so I'll make that Exhibit 6. And I note that, in the project plans, application materials, I do have some sort of renderings, but this is apparently something new, and I'm happy to see it.
Okay. Yeah, this is a little more accurate than maybe what you've seen. Can you see that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. That is better. It kind of gives me a further, further scope, I guess, of where things stand. So with that, go right ahead.
And here's another one for you. As Ray had mentioned, the trees are blocking the view from the street. You might see the top a little bit. And then for this other one, which I showed before, there are windows that, maybe bathroom windows, but definitely not blocking the view of the view shed of the condos. In addition to that, we do have folks from Sculpture Northwest, who is the partnership with the city. Ray had mentioned that the site selection was approved by council, but which is true, but it was a committee that consisted of the parks, members of the Parks Board, City Council, the Arts Commission, Sculpture Northwest, as well as city staff. So definitely a team effort on the city's part.
Thank you. So, Mr. Kaufman, that was what I was going to maybe have you just briefly elaborate on, which is the materials provided to me, the hearing examiner, did make it seen that there had been quite a process, the last year or two, or maybe even longer, but where there, the opportunity to have this piece from Sebastian, come to the city, and then ultimately there was the review committee. Maybe that's what you just described, and then the council ultimately decided on the location. And there's been the opportunity and participation both by staff, by volunteers, and potentially review and comment by the public multiple times before this public hearing. Is that an accurate understanding?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And the site before, Windjammer, just did not work for anybody. The public did not like it at all. And ultimately city council didn't.
Sure. But like I said, just maybe you can walk me through just what was you don't need to give me all the specific details, but the timeline and kind of what happened when. Like step one was, someone offered to, through a will or whatever the exact process was, but this piece is potentially available. And then that led to step, 2, 3, 4. Can you just give me a quick run through as far as you can remember?
Yes, absolutely. So this piece was offered to us through a gentleman who bequeathed it to the city. City of Bellingham was initially looked at. The gentleman who passed away, he lives up in Bellingham. Unfortunately, there were no locations in Bellingham that would work for that piece. One of the caveats is that it needs to be close to water. In addition to that, they were doing improvements to some of the other parks and whatnot. Meanwhile, Sculptural Northwest, a 501c3 nonprofit that's local, I believe here in Oak Harbor, was able to work with the gentleman's estate and as well as the city, and to have it installed here at the city. As I mentioned before, Windjammer Park was the first park that we looked at. There was a changeover in city council and some other political issues, which meant that the spot just didn't work anymore.
Well, I'll stop you for 1 sec, Mr. Gottman. So just in terms of timeline, right? So we've got someone passed away. The piece was offered through the behest of that person. City of Bellingham was said, we don't have a place for it potentially at the moment or whatnot. But then the 501c3 Sculpture Northwest, which I also think is on the island, Whidbey Island somewhere, if I remember right, because I believe I did have one other hearing or years ago in Langley potentially that involved something comparable or Coopville. But anyways, point being, then I think it went to this committee, right? Then the committee got involved before we're talking about Windjammer, am I right or not?
So the committee wasn't as well structured, so I really want to give a shout out or thank you to Brian Smith.
Okay.
So before, it was a few members of council in the Arts Commission and Sculpture Northwest. Brian Smith, who's our Parks and Recreation Director, who is now overseeing the Arts Commission, he developed this committee through his connections with the Park Board, Arts Commission, park staff, but really kind of had a little more well-rounded, I feel like. And as far as like timing goes, I believe, we're the years are just screaming by. I believe this was 2022. It was definitely 2022 when the Flintstone Park location was really solidified. And that's about all I could think of. And then other than that, we had a geotech testing done for this location. It works really well. I've just gotten design plans from DeVito Watershed, and Ram Construction's the general contractor to do the installation, site prep, and whatnot.
Great. And then just, if you know the answer, great. If you don't, no worries. I guess my question was, is this piece being moved from somewhere? I understand that often with this particular artist, pieces are installed sort of on site, meaning that, you know, they don't get, it's not a painting that can be transferred from one gallery to another. It's envisioned, and then, you know, this would be the first time it exists. But do you happen to know that answer? I don't know the answer. I just thought I'd ask.
Absolutely. Actually, I had to go up to Ram Construction just to make sure the thing was real after all the talk and controversy. So that's where it is currently. It's in their yard, being stored there. And then you are correct as far as the installation technique. So ideally, we're going to have to drive pin piles to allow for wind load to be taken care of. It's going to be one layer of concrete, allow that to cure. The piece will be installed, and then another layer of concrete will be put on top of that.
Okay, so the majority, as it were, of the piece, other than the foundation, other than the, you know, how it gets anchored, already has been created, constructed, etc. But do we know if it was up somewhere before now or not? I just, again, out of curiosity, if you don't know the answer, it's okay. I just thought I'd ask.
I don't know if it was actually installed somewhere previously. It did have to undergo some structural repairs, and again, it was Ram Construction oversaw that, and they did a wonderful job with fabrication and whatnot.
Okay, great. Well, I don't believe I have further questions, and I don't. Let's see. No, I don't think so. Did you have any thoughts or ideas on? And if this is not your area of expertise, don't worry about it. On my suggestion that I produce companion decisions simultaneously from a sort of ease of moving forward standpoint, if you have no thoughts or not one way or the other, that's fine. But I thought I would ask because you are technically representing the applicant today.
I appreciate it. I'm definitely going to lean on Ray and Dennis, and you know, I concur with what they had said.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. And again, you're sort of here, I know, in certain roles, but we don't have anyone specific from the Sculpture Northwest, right?
I believe there are members of Sculpture Northwest in the audience there.
Oh, in the room. Okay, well, that was going to be what I asked next. So.
Yeah, and as well as the Art Commission too. So they were planning on giving testimony. Do you want their names?
Well, if they're there in the room, I'm happy to see if there's someone that wanted to sort of lead on behalf there. So. If needed, we'll come back to you, Mr. Coffin, but it sounds like potentially we have some folks there in the room in council chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And unfortunately, I am not getting any video feed from the council chambers, but do we have folks there in the council chambers?
Is this where I stand?
Yes, we have about a dozen people present in council chambers.
We do. Okay. And so there may be members of the public that are interested at large, and there may be members specific to Arts Northwest or those that were assisting with the project. So with that, I wish I could see, but it sounds like someone is there at the podium. So I'm going to swear you in. Oh. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could state and spell your name clearly for the audio recording.
Richard Nash. Last name's Nash.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nash. And with that, please go right ahead.
I am only here representing Sculpture Northwest, so if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Sure. I guess my one, if you were able to follow my back and forth with Gideon Kaufman, just in terms of, you know, a little history of the actual sculpture, great. If you knew the answer, if not, no major concern. I just wanted to.
I will confess at this point that I don't hear particularly well, and that the speaker system in here is a bit challenging for me. But I did try to follow. I did try to follow most of the conversation here. Just briefly, the sculpture was brought up from Mexico, and it has been at Ram Construction up in Bellingham ever since. For what it's worth, Ram Construction, along with first with our engineer, went through the process of reinforcing the base, and so there's been some additional things done to the sculpture. All the welds were reviewed, and anything that required additional welding was completed. Everything was done so that the sculpture is actually about as good as it can get, and it also was repainted. And so we've been trying to do everything by the book with the city right from the get-go, and we've tried to keep everybody informed with all sorts of different notifications. We've had a large number of communication with the city council directly, as well as through email. And we have not done anything without everybody knowing what was going on.
Sure. And thank you. And my question, if you know the answer, you said the sculpture was brought from Mexico. I know the artist is Mexican, and my question, more out of curiosity, was the sculpture previously installed in Mexico?
Yeah.
At a location, or will this be the first time?
It's the very first time the sculpture's been shown anywhere.
Thank you.
It was created in Mexico.
I just thought that would be useful to be able to include in the record. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And then, very technical on the legal side, but I just need to ask because I know Sculpture Northwest has put a lot of work in. I had made a suggestion about producing two decisions simultaneously. One is specific to the sort of zoning, the other is specific to the shoreline. They would come out the same day, they would be companion decisions, but the hope is it causes or creates simplicity moving forward if anything needs to happen. I don't know if any of that made sense or you were able to hear it all, but on behalf of Sculpture Northwest, if you have an opinion about that, and now would be the time to share that.
I don't believe we have an opinion on that, and we are all for simplicity. We're still waiting for it.
Well, I can't promise, perfect simplicity, but I'm doing what I can to try to make sure that no matter what happens,
no reflection on you at all.
Well, I'm just saying the process. I'm hoping the process moving forward, one way or the other, will be as painless as possible.
Thank you.
Is my hope. So.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I don't have any specific or further questions, Mr. Nash. You answered the big one that I had, and I have renderings. I now have newer renderings that Gideon Kaufman is going to provide as Exhibit 6. That final piece of the puzzle of just trying to understand the history you've clarified, and but the materials that were provided to me, the hearing examiner, I think I have a good sense of where we're at and the process that has occurred. So nothing further from me, but did you have anything further you wanted to add, or are there other members of your group there in the room that wanted to come up and testify?
Anybody? It looks like this is good. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I can't see council chambers. Are there other folks in the room that are members of the public at large that were interested in testifying?
I have a question.
I'll do my best. It's not quite the back and forth, but who might this be?
My name is Ken Murphy. I'm a local resident.
Okay. Sure, I'm going to have to swear you in. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in any testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just state and spell your name for me.
First name is Ken, K-E-N. Last name is Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y.
Great, thank you, Mr. Murphy. And you said you're a area resident and you had a question, and if you sort of tell me what it is, then after we've heard from all members of the public interested in testifying, I'll hopefully be able to get an answer for you, okay?
First of all, my background is not engineering, but we've installed traffic signals and streetlights throughout the state of Oregon and Washington for as long as I owned the business that I owned. And this is for probably 20 years of experience. My concern is I didn't hear the exact information about the footing. How big is the footing and how was it designed and engineered?
So you're hoping to get additional information on the engineering details of the footing for the proposal?
I want to know what was done to was done to consider that the size of that artwork and what type of footing you're going to put it on. I see that it has a concrete spread that it stands on, but is there any?
Sure. So to give a sense of my role today, I am not an engineer, I'm an attorney, and I am looking at, well, the height is specifically what I'm looking at today. It sounds like your concern certainly would fall in the health, safety, welfare, want to make sure this doesn't fall over. I know that city staff, engineering experts are reviewing this and there's information about that. I would suggest that when the hearing ends, I think we can get you in touch with folks that are able to assess or provide you that specific information, but it's a little beyond the scope of what I'm being asked to address in terms of the criteria. Does that make sense, Mr. Murphy?
I understand what you're saying, but I think it's imperative when you talk about the height of something and increasing the height of something that is able to stay erected.
I do not disagree. I guess what I'm saying is my role is such that I'm looking at whether this is potentially appropriate, and then the engineering details, that level of review goes to those with that expertise. And what I'm saying is I'm confident staff would happily, keep you abreast of or let you look at the plans that are being proposed, and you'd be able to raise any concerns from an engineering expertise standpoint, because this isn't the final stage. There's the actual sort of construction site permit stage, but it's, again, a little beyond what I'm able to address. And hopefully I'm being clear. I'm not trying to be evasive here. I'm just...
No, I understand. And I'm glad that you are.
So...
My concern is the height of the unit, and you can see by the picture that it's much taller than the flagpole that's nearby. It's very top heavy, and you're putting it on what we call dredging fills. That whole area is filled with dredgings from the Puget Sound. So, to me, that's not very stable soil. And I have put in 22. Traffic signal bases that are 22 feet deep, 4 feet around, just because of issues with the surrounding soil. So that's my concern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to do anything else.
Great. Okay. Well, if you leave your information with staff, before leaving today, we'll make sure that you're in touch with engineering staff that can hopefully provide the details. Some of them are included in the materials, I think, that are publicly available. But I certainly am happy to get a response from Ray Lindenberg or other members of staff in terms of engineering thoughts, or at least have them explain next steps in terms of the process. So does that...
We just heard from John that he talked about the footing, but nothing was mentioned about the fact that it's going to be in fill and those type of things. I'm concerned that I'm concerned that the city's going to have a problem on their hand, especially if they put it there and they don't have the proper engineering. So that's all I have to say.
And thank you, Mr. Murphy. I appreciate your thoughts, and I think I'll have Ray Lindenberg speak to this shortly once we've heard from all members of the public. But I know from a process standpoint, if the engineering kind of review, that final site review that occurs says this isn't safe, then it doesn't move forward. But I'll let Ray Lindenberg speak to sort of final steps. That said, do we have anyone else there in the audience, there in council chambers, interested in testifying on this proposal?
Good morning.
Hi, and I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do. My
And
name
if you can
is
state and spell your name.
Michael Thielen, Michael. Thielen is T like Tom, Helen.
Thelen, is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you submit written comments in advance? The name sounded vaguely familiar.
I did.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Sorry, not good, but I'm just saying, there's a reason I recognize your name. I believe you had public comments that were provided in advance of the hearing, and they're included as part of Exhibit 5. So with that, Mr. Thielen, please go right ahead.
There's two things. One follows up on Ken Murphy's. It sounds like there's an open checkbook that whatever the cost is to secure this, the city is entering into that. And what he was alluding to was, in his work, the city said that the depth of a single light pole required him going another 20 feet down below what was recommended by engineering. And so if we're dealing with landfill that came out of the water, I think you're looking at really substantial costs way above what this project may have initially considered. And if that were the case, is there a limit on what the city's going to expend to install this?
Okay.
The second point was in 2003, Seattle had an earthquake. We felt it up here. By the way, I'm a resident of that condominium complex adjacent to Flintstone Park. As I walked into the kitchen and I saw our chandelier swaying, that was my first note that something was going on. I looked out the window, which, by the way, was referenced earlier as just a bathroom window. Ours is a full 5x5 window that faces the park, and we have another window that's 3x5 that is from the kitchen sink looking again in that same direction. Imagine looking out that window and literally watching the soil, the grass, roll like this. I think the only reason it was able to roll was because it was landfill. Or, again, in this case, from the bay. So my question is it really a stable place to plant this piece of art, which is also questionable as to whether it is meeting the definition of historic and cultural? If it was a totem pole, it would certainly do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your thoughts. And again, once we've heard from all members of the public, I'll turn it back to our applicant team to respond in city staff. So that said, are there others there in the room? Again, I don't know what's wrong with the ring process today. I can't see anyone.
There's another person wanting to speak.
Yes, there is another public speaker.
Well,
my name is Greg.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could just spell your name clearly, state and spell for me.
My name is Gray Jordan, and I'll spell both. First name is Gray, G-R-A-Y. Second name, G-I-O-R-D-A-N. I'm a condo resident, but not the closest condo. I want to...
Right. I just wanted you to know I did receive your written comments in advance of the hearing, and they are part of the record as Exhibit 5. So I am aware of concerns you've expressed in your written comments, but please go right ahead, Mr.
Thank you, I appreciate that, but these are in further of what I wrote, and to piggyback both on Ken Murphy and Mike Thielen, I'm surprised that the site location would have initially been chosen that requires significant engineering costs. And that's why I want to piggyback on both previous comments. There are plenty of parks that are not unstable. And another thing that I happened to see in the presentation is that it appears that the concrete base is above soil level. And I did not know if that was, I was not aware of that, and I don't know if that had been included in your ultimate height from ground. It appears that the rendering shows it at least a foot off the ground, which would increase everything. But it is ultimately the cost. I stood in this room and discussed cost for the wastewater treatment plant before it got built, and we all know that that costs more. I stood in this room and discussed the one-way Pioneer Street revision, and that did not work out exactly as planned. And so it was an excellent point by Mike Thielen. Is there a limit to how much we're willing to spend just for the support of this piece that would not be as expensive elsewhere? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Okay. Just any other members there of the public?
Yes, there's another person wanting to speak.
Okay, and do we have a sense of how many more people, or would this potentially be the last? I'm just trying to get a sense if
Maybe one more.
Maybe one more?
after that. Okay, just wanted to check, so thank you. Okay. Let me know when you're at the podium. I don't know why the system is so faulty today, but.
I'm ready.
Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
Yes. My name is John
And if you could
Kingsbury,
state,
JohnKingsbury. I'm the treasurer of Sculpture Northwest. Excuse me. The treasurer of Sculpture Northwest to address the cost.
sorry, and hold on one sec. Could you just re-spell your last name? It went so quick and there was a blip. I couldn't get it. So John, is it Kingsbury?
Kingsbury, Kingsbury.
Kingsbury, Bury. Thank you for that. Okay, treasurer of Sculpture Northwest, correct?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
Just to sum up issues about cost, our agreement with the city of Oak Harbor has always been that Sculpture Northwest is paying for the installation, and we are going to be reimbursed an amount of $35,000 that's coming out of the arts fund. So any costs that go, and not only the install, meaning the trucking for RAM construction, the installing, all the repair work that we've done to the sculpture itself, and the engineering. I'm not an engineer, but we do have a plan that's apparently an acceptable engineering plan. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the condos are built on the same fill. So
Sure.
I don't know why that's an issue.
Well, without going down that road, my question would be, so what sounds like you're saying, Mr. Kingsbury, is there's a fixed cost that's a reimbursement. I assume probably there was grant money involved. I can have city staff speak to that. But in terms of your organization, any costs that exceed that 35,000, you all will eat or this thing just won't happen. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, that's accurate. Currently, the estimate to install at this point is $50,000. So that is an expense that's going to be borne by Sculpture Northwest. And then once the sculpture is installed, the city is going to give us a check for $35,000 to help recoup some of those funds. And all these funds were not grant money. These were funds that are actually were George Drake's.
Sorry, Mr. Kingsbury, I didn't mean to imply your organization had grant money. I was trying to say that likely the reimbursement money from the city may well have come from grant money, which I'll have the city speak to. My understanding is your organization is a nonprofit 501c3. You know, folks volunteer, donate money, etc. But it sounds as if the plan is, you know, there will be certain costs, and once, you know, were this approved, were this structure art piece to be installed, then you would seek a fixed reimbursement from the city that everyone already knows what that is, the 35, and if it costs more than that, you know, it's not on the taxpayers. That's ultimately what I think we're trying to speak to. Am I summarizing that okay?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Anything further you wanted to add, Mr. Kingsbury?
No.
Great. Well, thank you for helping clarify that. And I understand there may be one other person there in the room interested.
Yes, one other person.
Hi, and I'm ready.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
Yes. My name is
And if you
Terry,
could
Terry, Ledesky. It's L-E, capital D-E-S-K-Y.
L-E, capital D, as in dog, E-S-K-Y, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Go.
I am a retired architect that's lived here for 30 plus years. And 23 years ago, I helped organize a 3-day workshop on visioning for downtown Oak Harbor and trying to save the historic district. I also have chaired Highland County's Historic Review Committee for years and been on that. The waterfront, one of the outcomes of that vision workshop was a path to take people around the harbor. And at that time, too, it was acknowledged that the Pioneer Way Street had turned it back onto the harbor and needed a reason to bring people downtown, okay? So we didn't have any world-class art, you know. So this element is in the perfect place that would bring people that are into sculpture, and especially world-class sculpture, to come walk the harbor, see and spend money downtown. Now, from an engineering standpoint, engineering code is designed for these soft soils and having a rigid, firm foundation versus if it was the opposite, if it was on solid rock, it could have a opposite design. But city engineering will take care of that, or at least review it. So this is not going to be something willy-dilly, a bunch of Habitat for Humanity construction folks are going to be putting the foundation in. This is going to be a serious footing. So the challenge we have in Oak Harbor is it's on a slope. If I walked up Dock Street, I wouldn't have to walk very far before I gained my 2 feet or, you know, height limitation on this at 37. I'd be up there, well above it. So because this is a point, it's an opportunity to have a artistic element that says you've arrived. This is the place. So anyway, I think at the time, a group of 12 architects and a professor of planning in the University of Southern Florida, you know, we were looking at height elevation restrictions on construction of architecture, not art. So to me, this is a great day of history that I finally see an argument for art in Oak Harbor, and I've been waiting for that. Langley wouldn't have shook a second to accept this. So this is a great day in Oak Harbor.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ledesky. Okay, so as far as I am aware, that then concludes members of the public there in the room. Is that right?
Yeah, there's nobody else wanting to speak.
Great. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go back to planning staff and Ray Lindenberg. Can you touch on process for us, and then any comments sort of in response to what we've heard? By process, I mean going back to Mr. Hoffman. Sorry if I got that wrong. I'm 4 or 5 pages back from my notes now, but just in terms of, I, the hearing examiner, am not an engineer, but am I correct in thinking there'll be additional review by those with engineering expertise, et cetera?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we would review engineering for virtually any project that's, being built upon the ground. So, as mentioned by one of the public there, there's different engineering for different types of soils. There are other buildings that are built on fill in the city of Oak Harbor. There are buildings that are built on areas that used to be wetlands, things like that. There's engineering for all of that, and I have full faith and confidence in our engineering and building staff to review the geotechnical report that's been prepared and engineering plans for the actual plinth, the base of the structure. We go through that on a regular basis. That's what their job is. And like I said, I have full faith that they are going to do a good job in reviewing that and making sure that it's safe and secure.
Okay, and although we did hear from the treasurer for Sculpture Northwest, but am I correct in my assessment that the hearing examiner, when looking at the criteria I'm asked to address for both the for the CUP, site plan review, SSDP, and shoreline variance, potential cost is not one of the criteria. I certainly understand, the public has concerns about cost, but that is something that would be a political issue with the council, not something the appointed hearing examiner, not an elected official, not even an employee, not something I'm addressing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. As I mentioned during my presentation, we're looking at the difference between a 35-foot height structure and a 37-foot height structure. It has been determined already by the city council that this is an artistic piece, which is also what the code says, not just historic or cultural. So there is that determination that's already been made by the city council. The decision today is to whether or not the sculpture itself, the structure itself, meets the criteria in that conditional use code section that I referenced, and then thereby secondarily whether it meets the standards that are in the Shoreline Master Program as well. And so that's what we're here for today. That's for your decision. Like you mentioned, the costs and where that money is coming from is a political decision. And my understanding was that the money that is being spent by the city is from our arts fund, and it is not allowed to be used for other things. It is to be used for public arts. So I can't address too much of what where that's coming from, as I'm not the applicant, and I can allow Gideon to kind of address that a little bit if he has more information to provide as well.
I'm happy to hear from Gideon Coppin. That said, again, my role is very limited, and I recognize there's, differences of opinion that occur, especially for things like public art. But ultimately, the money aspects are not what the hearing examiner, am tasked with looking at. As you stressed, there were several, political decisions made, as if you want to call them those, in terms of, is this count as an art piece? Where should this potentially go? And then ultimately, my role is somewhat limited, which is, can we go 2.5 feet higher than would have been allowed both under the zoning code and the shoreline master program, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Anything further? I'm happy to go to Gideon Coppin in a second to close, but anything further on behalf of planning staff?
No, I was just looking at my notes. I think we've got it all covered. Thank you.
Okay. Gideon Coppin, anything final then in terms of your role as the applicant representative?
Nothing really substantial other than I think Ray really summarized elements perfectly. As far as maybe putting people at ease a little bit regarding engineering, we did have a geotechnical test done by geoengineers, and then a structural engineer developing the design. So not a PE, but an SE. So once that goes through the city's review process, it gets okay, then I believe it'll be available for the public.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then final question, I guess, Ray Lindenberger or others, but not others, plural, but you or clerk, the hearing examiner clerk, but clearly there are folks interested in this. I believe once we get me what I've proposed as Exhibit 6, that was the new artist rendering, which I'm confident staff will send my way, that was shared. But for folks that would like to get a copy or read my decision or decisions, potentially plural, as referenced, when they're issued in the next few weeks, how would they be able to do so? Can you just speak to sort of next steps, Ray Lindenberg?
Yeah, I would suggest that for folks who are in the council chambers right now is to leave their information with either Kim or one of the city staff that's in that room, and we can get that to them. Or they can just get in touch with me, in a week or two when that decision comes out, and we can provide that information to them as well. They can get a hold of me through the website. Email usually works best for that, but otherwise I would just suggest that they leave their information there and we can send it to them.
And I have to say, 2 weeks would be at best. This is the fifth matter that I, the hearing examiner, am hearing for the city of Oak Harbor in the last week. So I'm going to make every effort to produce all 5 decisions, in due order. But for folks interested today, it's not going to be a week. At best, it will be 2. Hopefully, not long after that. But Ray painted me in the corner there. I just want to make sure it's clear that this is an unusually high volume for the city of Oak Harbor. 5 public hearings in a week. I don't think we've ever had more than 1 or maybe 2 ever in 1 month, let alone in a week. So I believe I have everything I need. And this one, we saved the most complex for last in terms of the moving parts that are involved with jurisdictionally and shoreline master program, et cetera. But I believe, once again, Exhibit 6 is provided from staff. I'll have what I need. And then produce a decision, and folks there in the room, again, if you leave your info and your email in particular with staff, they'll ensure that you receive a copy of my decision or decisions on this matter, which I intend to produce here in the next few weeks. So thanks to all those that participated today, took the time to provide written comments and also testify. I know there are differences of opinion, especially when it comes to things like art, but definitely appreciate working with the jurisdiction community where folks care, period. So sometimes I have projects where nobody participates, and it's a little terrifying. So the fact that, folks are clearly care about what's happening, I do appreciate, and one of the reasons I enjoy working in Oak Harbor. So with all that, I will end the hearing. Wish everyone safety and good health moving forward. Thank you, everybody.